In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Welcome, friends, to Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast in Orlando, Florida. A totally 100% apolitical podcast. We have no political opinions on this program. We support whoever is in power at the time. Our official website is augustusinvictus.com, and that is me, yours truly, the host of this program. We're simulcasting to YouTube and something else today. I don't remember. I have to pay for the restream. We're going to up the ante on that soon. However, while I'm implementing these changes, and by I mean we, I was hoping to ask right at the outset. I don't have YouTube up on the computer, but I was hoping to ask at the outset, why do people watch this program? I was thinking of doing a Twitter poll on it, except even with the takeover of Twitter, I still appear to be shadow banned. I guess I got it deep in the code. Anyway, is the audience listening because of legal news? Is it because we divert from legal news and you're hoping to hear some obscure ancient political tract or some legal treatise from the Middle Ages, which is actually what I was going to do today? What we were going to read today was the Polycraticus, the Statesman's book, it's called, just like the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. They're like called something like the Emperor's Handbook or something like that. So this is the Statesman's book. John of Salisbury, Polycraticus, excuse me. We were going to read that today and talk about medieval philosophies of the state. However, it turns out that just before going on air, I guess a Russian missile reportedly hit Poland. Who knows what really happened? Pentagon hasn't even confirmed it yet. But Twitter and the media are on fire that World War III has just begun, that Article 5 of the NATO treaty is going to be invoked, that we will have a nuclear winter for Christmas this year. So I thought we'd talk about that instead. We will get to John of Salisbury. What an amazing book Polycraticus is. I think we're going to talk about the NATO treaty. We're going to talk about public international law in general, the difference between public and private international law. We're going to talk about how NATO exists. We're going to talk about treaties, talking about the supreme law of the land here in America. We're going to talk about Article 5 itself. And we're going to talk, of course, about Carl Schmitt, the concept of the political, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, the League of Nations, the United Nations, everything that's led up to this point. Going back to the European Congresses, actually, during the Napoleonic Wars and after. Been listening to a lot of Kissinger's diplomacy lately, listening because I got the audiobook, because quite frankly, I have a lot to do, and so on my drives, that's what I do. That's how I get my jollies. I listen to Kissinger riding down I-4. Without having YouTube up, it is impossible for me to check whether the audio is working, so I'm going to have to go this way. Really got to fix this restream situation, because that would give me the chat box inside of OBS, which is what I should be doing if I were more professional. It does look like we are live. Nope, that was episode 63. Here's episode 64.
We're live.
All right. Oh, people actually answered the original question. How about that? You are wise and honest, unlike 99% of attorneys. As a member of several bars, no comment, but thank you. Stormhunter, I love your history lessons and listening to your takes on current events. So, both the ancient treatises and the news. Let's see, you share, assuming that's wisdom, historical truth, truly rare to hear the truth about law. It's supposed to be a guarded secret by the lawyer cabal. That's very true. Very true. Russian MOD Audio is perfect. That's good. All right, so Russian MOD have denied any military operations in the area. So there are a lot of early reports. The Pentagon saying they haven't corroborated anything. So this is all the media's baby. I can't imagine why the media would want to sell that Russia is striking a NATO country and trying to drag us into World War III. Why would they do that? Who controls the media anyway? Don't they have any sense of responsibility? Civic duty? So Pentagon is not corroborating it. Poland isn't even corroborating it. I guess they're holding a crisis meeting right now. You can see all this yourself. This is not something in my, lawyer's database here. This is on Twitter. These are, World War III is trending right now on Twitter. Pentagon is trending on Twitter when they came out saying they have no idea what's going on. AP is saying, breaking. A senior U.S. intelligence official says Russian missiles crossed into NATO member Poland, killing 2 people. So, someone in U.S. intelligence has told AP that 2 civilians have died due to a Russian missile strike in Poland. AP continues, a Polish government spokesman did not immediately confirm the information but said leaders were meeting on crisis situation. So really nobody has any idea what's going on, but Twitter is on fire about all this. Polish media, it's 59 minutes ago, reported that 2 people died Tuesday after a projectile struck an area where grain was drying in a city I can't pronounce, a village near the border with Ukraine. Now, some of the speculation that I've seen, again, on the internet machine, it means largely nothing, but some of the speculation I've seen is that this was an errant missile, that it was an accident, it was not a deliberate strike against Poland, that Russia and Putin specifically, of course, he's the bad guy, they are not deliberately trying to start World War III, and he's not a madman. That's the speculation I've seen. This is an errant missile, it was a mistake, and this will not be World War III. However, as you know, facts have very little to do with world events. And the law is window dressing for what we're going to do, right? It would be a grave mistake for anyone, and really, quite frankly, dear audience member, as much as I appreciate you, what you think about any of this really doesn't mean anything. What I think about this doesn't really mean anything, to be quite frank, except that I'm more likely to be jailed than you are for saying the wrong thing. Like in 1984, when he says only the proles are free, right? Because if you're a member of the party, if you're a member of the club, like the lawyers club, your freedom of speech is a little more limited. But it really doesn't matter what we think. I'm saying it's a grave mistake just for your own perspective on the world. For your mental health, it's probably the opposite of a mistake. It's probably the right thing to do, to believe that we're going to judge this case by the law. We're going to look at these facts objectively. We're going to get to the truth of this situation. We're going to find out who fired that missile, on whose orders, how it got there in Poland, and we're going to make a rational decision based on these facts. That would be great. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is a bunch of people in a bunch of different rooms all across the world are going to enter into political calculations. If you, and this is as long back as human history goes, one of the things that my professor told me to do he drafted me for an independent study on realpolitik. First thing he had me read was Thucydides' The Peloponnesian War. I would urge all of you to go out and buy the Landmark version of that. The Landmark series is this series of historical books. They've got Xenophon, The Campaigns of Alexander. They've got Julius Caesar. I think it's the Civil War. They've got, obviously, Thucydides, The Peloponnesian War. They've got Herodotus, the histories. The Landmark series is beautiful because it has maps for everything they're talking about. Because if you just read this dry prose, this just words for 400 pages, You have no idea where any of these places are. This is just a bunch of lists of names of towns that don't even exist anymore, just jumbled up in your head. If you have the landmark edition of these books, you can see every single place. You can see where the Spartans are going to, who they're making treaties with, why that would be important in their fight against Athens. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, like I said, this goes all the way back as far as you can go in human history, that we're not going to judge this based on objective facts and considerations. We're going to judge this based on political realities and realpolitik. So, in that book, there's a very telling, amazing thing that Thucydides writes, and he writes that the Athenians, they sent out their navy to go to war against this certain city-state to exercise their navy. That was the justification, at least in the book. Who knows what the Athenians justified it with at the time to their people when they had to vote for this nonsense. Probably, well, they, disrespected somebody's human rights, or, they vandalized a painting of Ceres, or, Demeter, I forget which is Greek, which is Roman. Whatever it is, they make up some justification, but Thucydides is pointing out, no, this was to exercise the navy, and you do this because if you don't send your soldiers and your sailors out to war, they will get rusty, they will forget how to go to war, they'll get soft, and they're going to get plowed over when we do go to war, ultimately with the Spartans, right? So to bring us back to where we're at today, when Russian missiles hit Poland, how that happened is really of very little consequence. I'm sure that there are good people somewhere in the government who actually care about that question. I'm sure that there are lawyers who really care about the facts and who want the truth to come to light. However, that is not the main consideration. The main consideration is going to be, are we going to go to war with Russia, and how? Do we have the resources to go to war with Russia? Most importantly, do we have the international support to go to war with Russia? Also, an equally important consideration, what international support does Russia have? Who are our enemies going to be? Who's this new axis of evil going to be when NATO declares war? Right? Or when the US declares war, and Germany declares war, and England declares war, and everybody declares war because they're in NATO, whatever they're going to do. What are the lines that are going to be drawn? Right? And what are their respective capacities for war? Will China attack us, and where? Are they going to ally with Russia and attack us militarily? Or are they going to escalate the trade war? Will Iran suddenly go after Israel, right? Who's going to rebel? Who can the CIA pay off to rebel in the Russian Empire against the Russian government? How can we subvert them? Like, these are the actual considerations. The missile in Poland is just, can we use this? Is this time to go to war? Is this a legitimate justification? The facts of it are secondary. One of my favorite examples of this is the Zimmerman telegram. I love this story. I think he was the best history teacher in the world. When I was in 11th grade, my American history teacher, Mr. Davis, older black dude, just the coolest guy, best teacher I've ever had. One of the best teachers I've ever had. Certainly the best history teacher I've ever had. This guy would pepper all these lessons with these anecdotal stories, these like gems of history. I also took African American history with him, and I'll say the bulk of that class was watching Roots. That's another story. But in American history, one of the stories he told us was about Tecumseh. Right? The curse of the great white father. I love that story too. forget, was it Harrison? I think it was Harrison who killed Tecumseh, or Harrison was in power. I think Harrison was president when Tecumseh died. And he placed a curse on the Great White Father. And that, obviously, that was the president of the United States, right? Because this was during the Great American Indian War that lasted for 400 years. He placed a curse on the Great White Father, and from that point forward, every 20 years, the president died in office. It's the damnedest thing. This happened. This is historical fact. And you wonder, well, did anybody take this seriously? I'll tell you this, because this is what Mr. Davis told us. It was serious enough that Ronald Reagan was slated for that death. And his wife was consulting with astrologers and everybody else she could to make sure that this didn't happen. And sure enough, it was an assassination attempt, and it looked like the curse was broken, and this was finally verified when George W. Bush took office, and he was not assassinated. So that curse of the Great White Father lasted for generations. That was one of my favorite stories that he told us. Another favorite story is the Zimmerman telegram, and that is what we're talking about today. So it's World War I, right? I love this story. I love this story because we all know these things. We know how World War I, how we came to be involved in it. We know that, World War II, Roosevelt allowed the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. We knew this was going to happen. We put an embargo on steel and we dragged Japan, we made Japan attack us in World War II, right? We know that. We know how Roosevelt got us into the war. We know how, you're about to know anyway, how Wilson got us into World War I. And what's amazing is, when something like, the Civil War happens, well, by golly, of course, that was a moral war. There were no political calculations in that. No political considerations or economic considerations whatsoever. This was a moral crusade against slavery. And this was the one war in human history where we went to war for morality. These Union boys were all such good Christian men that they got on their high horses and marched into the South for nothing more than a moral dispute. We actually believe that nonsense today. Same as we know all this stuff about Roosevelt causing the Japanese to bomb us. We all knew that something was going to happen or Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked, however specific you want to be. And yet, we still, to this day, believe, well, we were supposed to get into that war because the Nazis were evil, and we're all good guys, and that evil had to be stopped. We fought World War II for a moral reason. There were no political considerations. And even if there were political calculations, they're all irrelevant to the fact that this ultimate evil of Nazism had to be stomped out. Absurd. Absolutely absurd. Does not take into consideration the conflict between Roosevelt and, the entire English Empire. I would say Churchill, but it didn't really matter who was prime minister. The fact is that Britain ruled the waves. Britain was the major sea power, and it was our national interest to tear down the British Empire, to take over the world from Britain. That's exactly what we did. All this nonsense about the evils of Nazism and we just had to get into this war for moral reasons, garbage. If that were the case, like Patton said, we would have kept marching right to Moscow. War has nothing to do with morality. Morality is the dressing that we give it to sell it to the people so they will pay the taxes so that we can send our tanks and our planes and our men over there. Law has absolutely nothing to do with war. That's exactly why we're talking about this Article 5 situation today, right? Law is our justification because even though we're so enlightened, post-Christian, progressive, and we know that none of that, supernatural mumbo-jumbo exists, right? We base everything on pure reason because we're so smart and intelligent. We crawled out of the Dark Ages. Even so, we still feel the need to justify things by just war. Just cause for war is necessary before we can just go bombing people, right? We have to have not just a moral reason, but a legal reason to do this. Otherwise, your war is illegal. It's a war of aggression. We would never engage in a war of aggression. Everything we do is based on the law. In this case, the North Atlantic Treaty, Article 5, which, if you go to NATO's website, there's an article titled Collective Defense and Article 5, and it says the principle of collective defense is at the very heart of NATO's founding treaty. Right off the bat, very forthright, amazingly forthright for something like this. The entire purpose of NATO is that it is a defense treaty. We have teamed up with all of these people, and I will say right at the outset, I'm not necessarily a NATO hater. If the point of NATO was to keep Europe from falling into Soviet hands, hey, I'm on board. What's the problem, pimpin' man? Like, if you are trying to keep the Soviets, do you have any idea what happened when we handed over half of Europe to the Soviets? Should we have handed the rest over too? The point of NATO, ostensibly, is to prevent that from happening. Great. But let's not pretend it's anything else, right? At this point, the Soviet Union has fallen. What is the point of it now? It's to keep power, obviously. NATO, forget about these different rivalries between, Mexico and Canada and America for the Western Hemisphere, or, Iran and Israel for the Middle East, or France and Germany and England as colonial powers, and Italy and all that. Like, NATO is a block of power. We have shared interests, shared strategic interests. It is a powerful organization of states, the mastermind of the West in a military apparatus. I mean, it's nothing to screw with, to put it in vulgar terms. As an American, how can you argue with it? You are in power. You have no idea the blessing you have being born into America, despite all the blue hairs and things we can't say on the radio. We are still the most powerful country in the world. Things like NATO serve our interests. Yes, we get dragged into a bunch of foreign wars that we have really no, again, moral business being in, but really this is part of our empire. It's part of the way that we uphold this international order that we created, for good or for bad, right? Like in The Godfather, after when Michael's having a stroke in the kitchen, he's like, no, I'm in charge here for good or for bad. You don't go behind my back. Like, I am in control of this family. That's the United States. Like, yeah, we do some super bad things. NATO is part of that empire, right? This entire thing that we created, United Nations, all of this is to serve American interests, ostensibly. Now, whether that actually serves American interests, whether, reactionary ideology would agree that this is the way forward, all that's beside the point. The fact is, this is what exists right now. And realpolitik demands that you address what is right now. Not what you want, not what you think would be better, not what would be better post-democracy, not what we can go back to in medieval monarchy, which would be my preference personally, but what exists at this very moment. And at this very moment, the crisis of the day is Article 5 being invoked by NATO countries to go to war with Russia and trigger World War III. That's the political reality under discussion today. So, let's see if we've got any breaks in this story on World War III on Twitter. No, I don't see anything going on. It looks like the same tweets have been here for the last half hour, which means either World War III broke out and Twitter blew up, or this story is cooling down. Who knows? Let's see what's going on the internet machine. Got a live chat here. Pentagon still not corroborating anything. Let's read the AP article. Actually, let's not, because the AP article talks about Zelensky. I wanted to talk about the North Atlantic Treaty. All right. So the treaty itself. Let's get some textual analysis here. Washington, D.C., April 4th, 1949. What's amazing about modern treaties is their recitation of all these interests that we supposedly have. All these things we believe in. Right? Let's see. Let's go to the chat here. Audio is good. All right. Media accelerationism. Yeah, again, nobody is claiming anything on here. I'm even seeing who was it said that Russia is denying that it was their. Russia is saying it wasn't their missile. Yeah, that would be interesting if that's the case. Pentagon's not corroborating it. Neither is Poland. So why would the media be accelerating this sort of conflagration? I can't imagine. There's also that pipeline that blew up. Who knows how that happened? Anyway, the parties to this treaty reaffirm their faith in the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and their desire to live in peace with all peoples and all governments. They are determined to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of their peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. They seek to promote stability and well-being in the North Atlantic area. They are resolved to unite their efforts for collective defense and for the preservation of peace and security. They therefore agree to this North Atlantic Treaty. That's the preamble. There are 14 articles to this treaty. Article 5, I will get to that. The parties undertake, this is Article 1, the parties undertake, as set forth in the Charter of the United Nations, to settle any international dispute in which they may be involved by peaceful means, in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered, and to refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. So what is the purpose of the United Nations? What would possess people to put Russia and China on the Security Council of the United Nations? And maybe for the uninitiated, that's a lesson in itself, is what exactly is the Security Council as opposed to the General Assembly? So the General Assembly is all of the countries that are part of the United Nations. The Security Council are the top dogs, the big five, that really direct everything in the world when you think about it. And that's kind of their entire purpose. They have veto power, the Security Council. They have power to declare who can go to war and with whom. They can decide what is legitimate use of force and what is illegitimate use of force. Those are the United States, Britain, France, Russia, and China, last I checked. We wanted China because they were the counterbalance to Japan, which was a major problem for us back in World War II. God knows why we wanted Russia, I guess because they were powerful. That's really what it comes down to, right? Britain and America, obvious choices. And then France. How did France get on the Security Council when they just got steamrolled by the Germans? They had no business being on there. No real power at all. No say in any world affairs. And I think the general consensus is that France became part of the Security Council because of the sheer power of will of Charles de Gaulle. Just an amazing guy. Just a strong-willed man. He forced France onto the Security Council. So that's the composition of it. So as far as what is inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations, as far as the use of force or the threat of force, well, who determines that but the Security Council? And the NATO was established after, obviously, the Security Council. So this is a defense against, again, Russia. That's really what we're talking about, is defending Europe from Russian invasion, although that's obviously, we've had some mission creep since then. Article 2. The parties will contribute toward the further development of peaceful and friendly international relations by strengthening their free institutions, by bringing about a better understanding of the principles upon which these institutions are founded, and by promoting conditions of stability and well-being. They will seek to eliminate conflict in their international economic policies and will encourage economic collaboration between any or all of them. This is one of the ongoing themes of international law. You'll see it actually in Deadwood. I think it's a very powerful example of it when Hearst shows up. And honestly, it's been like over a decade since I saw that show, so I don't think I'm giving any spoilers here. But Hearst is talking about how commerce makes us civilized, right? It's commerce that prevents us from being violent. And that's not just some Hollywood writer's view. It's not just, George Randolph Hearst's view. This is European Policy 101. If we can engage in trade, if we have commerce across our borders, then we're not going to go to war with each other. That was Britain's foreign policy forever. Like, let's trade with everybody. Let's engage in commerce. Let's all get rich. And then we won't want to fight each other. When World War II was concluded, we had Europe as an economic zone. All conspiracy theories aside, the purpose was explicitly to create peace in Europe, peaceful, stable situation in Europe, by engaging in commerce. You make this an economic zone. You solidify the trade all across Europe, and eventually you can have something like the European Union, which is a supra-political organization. And there are, again, all conspiracy theories aside, there are books on this. This is the stated policy of many European politicians. Eventually, what they want, some of them, not all of them, but what these people driving the boat, what they want is a United States of Europe. They want something like our federal government, where there's an actual government of Europe. It's not just disjointed states, but they are all one government like we are in the United States, right? Good or bad, that's the theory. And this is not just the legal theory, it's not just something in Europe. This is international relations as well. Alexander Wendt wrote about the teleology of human systems, basically, saying, look back to prehistory, to history, look at the span of ages, and you see this teleology leading to a world government. So academicians have been saying this for years, that eventually, like it or not, conspiracy theory or not, we will end up at a world government. This is just the pattern of world events. Eventually, it will get there. Technology, political quote-unquote progress, all these things that have developed throughout centuries, throughout millennia, they all point to one end, which is world government. We were once disjointed tribes. We were nomad hunter-gatherers, right? We formed into societies. We formed into city-states. Then we formed into larger kingdoms. And then we formed into nation-states, which is our model presently. Post-World War II especially, we've had things like, again, the European Union, but also ASEAN, Mercosur, all these regional trade blocs. We have the World Trade Organization. We have, the International Court of Justice, or the International Criminal Court. And these things, really, who cares? They don't really affect us, first world nations, that is. Again, that's, in my humble opinion, a way of our empire imposing these quote-unquote democratic values on third world countries. But that's another subject. The point is, however, there is a very clear trend toward these regional blocs turning into regional political systems as opposed to economic ones. Like, economic trade is just one more step in the ladder to these political organizations, super political, ultimately political, like we have in the federal government here in America. And again, whether it's centuries, whether it's another millennium, eventually we will end up at world government. That theory objectively is difficult to deny. You can say that without saying that's a good thing, but it's hard to argue that it's happening, that it's been happening for thousands of years, that ultimately it will come to pass. Yes, there are empires and they fall, and, we had Alexander and then we had Genghis Khan, and, these things all disappear. Roman Empire's gone, right? But look at where we are now. They keep collapsing. They keep coming back. They keep collapsing. They keep coming back bigger. At this point, this system that we have, this global system, it's being tested. It's being tested over and over and over again. COVID shutting down the global supply chain problems. You can complain about TikTok giving your kids brain damage all you want, but this internet thing, it's not a phase. It's not a fad. Globalism is not something that's going to go away because you're going to vote it out of office in some random district in Arizona or Colorado. Like, you're high. You're on drugs if you think that. It's something that is so beyond some local election that it's beyond the power of any one man or even any one country at this point. All of which is to say, Article 2 of NATO is about economic collaboration being encouraged by all the member parties to this treaty. Because ultimately that means political cooperation, right? Article 3. In order more effectively to achieve the objectives of this treaty, the parties, separately and jointly by means of continuous and effective self-help and mutual aid, will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. That's interesting. So we do have, joint exercises, joint training programs, intelligence sharing programs with all these countries in NATO. I didn't realize, quite honestly, it was in Article 3. It's kind of enshrined in there. We have to help each other individually and collectively. We need to maintain and develop our capacity to resist armed attack. Article 4, the parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. Which is what's been going on the past several months since Russia invaded Ukraine. Because the question has always been, how long is it going to be before he crosses into Poland? CNN was trying to sell us on that back over the summer. He's going to go into Poland. He's going to go into Poland. He's going to go into Poland. We need to activate NATO. We need to declare war now. We need to, engage in preliminary strikes against Russia. Let's just assume he's going to do it. Let's go to war. Article 5. This is the topic of discussion today, all over Twitter. And now you can go into your comment thread wars armed with the actual text of Article 5. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. And consequently, they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with the other parties, such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. Any such armed attack and all measures taken as a result thereof shall immediately be reported to the Security Council. Such measures shall be terminated when the Security Council has taken the measures necessary to restore and maintain international peace and security. That will be interesting with the United States, Britain, France, and Russia and China being the Security Council. Those kind of are the dividing lines here. The West being the United States, Britain, and France versus Russia and China. Who could have seen that coming? So that's the actual text of Article 5. Basically a screw around and find out article, right? If any of us are subject to an armed attack, we have the right individually, and we as treaty members have the right collectively to respond to that attack with military force. And once we do take military force, like, we don't have to go to the Security Council to ask you permission. Once we do engage in defending ourselves, because that's what we're going to do, then we'll take it to the Security Council. And when the Security Council gets around to reestablishing peace and security, etc., then maybe we'll stop with the war. But this is saying, yeah, we're just gonna not go to the Security Council, because what a waste of time that would be. I mean, again, the entire point of NATO is Soviet Union is on the Security Council. We're not going to them to ask if we can defend ourselves against them. That would be ridiculous. All right, what's this? Official texts. Madrid Summit Declaration. Oh, that's what we wanted to get to. So this was issued by the NATO heads of state and government participating in the meeting of the North Atlantic Council in Madrid, 29 June 2022. So this summer, in the midst of all this hullabaloo about Russia, they met in Madrid. Looking at the live chat here, Belum Acta on Telegram published the Russian Wire. They said it wasn't their missile. Interesting. Well, what a waste of a program, huh? We should have read the Polycraticus if we're not going into World War III today. Lesson learned, right? But now you will be armed with all of this next time, oh, Thanksgiving's next week. You're welcome. When you go to your family on Thanksgiving and your liberal cousin is bringing up NATO and Russia and, trans rights in the Ukraine, you're going to know all this. So, great. We didn't waste an episode today. We, the heads of state and government of the North Atlantic Alliance, have gathered in Madrid as war has returned to the European continent. We face a critical time for our security and international peace and stability. We stand together in unity and solidarity and reaffirm the enduring transatlantic bond between our nations. NATO is a defensive alliance and poses no threat to any country. NATO remains the foundation of our collective defense and the essential forum for security consultations and decisions among allies. Our commitment to the Washington Treaty, including Article 5, is ironclad. In this radically changed security environment, this summit marks a milestone in strengthening our alliance and accelerating its adaptation. The Washington Treaty is the one we were reading from, because it was executed in Washington in 1949. So they're saying that their commitment to Article 5, which is the collective defense article, is ironclad, which is what the Pentagon official said earlier today. Let's find that clip. Pentagon press secretary, that's who it was. He's saying we can't corroborate the missile attack came from Russia, but, quote, we have been crystal clear that we will defend every inch of NATO territory, end quote. So that's what they're saying in Section 1 here of this NATO statement, the Madrid Summit Declaration, that we're all 100% on board. Anybody attacks any NATO country, we're going to respond. And perhaps that might be why Putin was in an uproar when NATO countries started saying, yeah, let's get the Ukraine in here. Let's get the Ukraine in here. Let's make Ukraine a member country of NATO while they're at war with Russia. What do you make of that if you are Putin, right? You're in a war with a country, and NATO, which consists of Canada, America, Britain, France, Germany, Sweden, all of the entirety of North America and Europe, basically. They're saying, hey, let's make Ukraine one of us so that the next missile that launches from a Russian anything and hits Ukraine has all of a sudden hit a NATO country, and now Russia's at war with everybody in the West. Obviously, if you're in Putin's position, you would be outraged by that suggestion. Obviously, in the middle of a war, you can't draft that country into NATO and then pretend that you're defending them. You can't pretend that your war at that point is a defensive action, a collective self-defense triggering Article 5. Ridiculous. You can, however, claim that a missile, whether Russia's claiming credit for it or not, that hits Poland, well, that could trigger Article 5. Now we've got collective self-defense authorized legally. Where else did that missile come from? The Zimmerman telegram. I never did get to that bloody story. So this is why it's my favorite. And we're right here at the end of the hour so that this whole thing can come full circle. The whole point I was making about Mr. Davis and Tecumseh and all this American history stuff is this, the Zimmerman telegram. So it's World War I, right? We are just itching to get into there. In this war to end all wars, this war to spread democracy all over the world, Woodrow Wilson is just dying to get in there and show the world American values. All of a sudden, Germany, sends a telegram to Mexico. These just the gall of these Germans. They send this telegram to Mexico, and they encourage the Mexican government to invade the United States. During World War I. Now, United States has nothing to do with the war. We have not declared war on anybody. We're just minding our own business. Yeah, the government's dying to get into it, but America's isolationist at the time. We don't want anything to do with World War I. And Germany writes this inexplicable telegram to Mexico saying, you need to invade the United States. Keep them bogged down in a war there. So that way they won't want to come invade us over here in Europe. How did they discover this telegram? Well, amazingly, they got this, they got a mail ship, right? And they just intercepted the telegram on this mail ship. What's amazing about this is how many tens of thousands of pieces of mail were on that mail ship, and they just targeted, just zoomed in right on this one letter, this needle in the haystack. Out of tens of thousands on this boat coming from Germany, this one letter saying you should invade the United States. What are the chances of that? Does anybody really believe that Germany would do something that insane? Or that we just have just the best dumb luck that we just happened upon this magical telegram that all of a sudden gave Wilson's administration to enter World War I? Well, there you have it, folks. Germany just urged Mexico to invade us. That makes them an enemy. Now we have to respond. We've got to enter World War I now. We can't have foreign powers, foreign barbarous kings like this German king over there, encouraging our neighbors to invade us. We got to go spread some democracy over there. That's the Zimmerman telegram story. That's how he got involved in World War I. That is the real consideration when we see missiles launched into Poland. Did Russia send it? I don't know. Did Saddam have weapons of mass destruction? Does it matter? We invaded. We went in 2003, kicked in the door, hanged Saddam. It's over. You can cry all about how he didn't actually have WMDs, and it doesn't mean a bloody thing. He's dead. Iraq is gone. The war happened. So years from now, your kids are going to be asking, did Russia really hit Poland with a missile in November of 2022? And you're going to be thinking, does that matter? Because everybody's dead now. We've got a nuclear winter. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Like I said, the law, morality, these are the things that we use to justify our realpolitik decisions to the people. These are the things that we use to give things a veneer of respectability so that the public will pay for these wars, so that we can tax them, so we can put it in the media, make it look good. But really, the only question is, can we win this war? If we declare war on Russia right now, and we have NATO, and the lines are drawn, and if China comes in with Russia, what problems is that going to cost us? Is Putin mad enough to use nukes? Is Biden? These are the real questions. Who launched it and why? And was it an errant missile or a deliberate strike? And were they really casualties, or were they, military members, or were they reporters? Who knows? Who cares? Those things are irrelevant. The political calculations are all that matter. So, can take all that to Thanksgiving dinner next week. Hopefully we'll have another episode next Tuesday, though. Till then, everyone.